The call came at 2:13 in the morning Kabul time. Jack Rowan had been 3 months into his deployment leading a small reconnaissance unit through the Hindu Kush Mountains when his satellite phone buzzed against his chest. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. He stepped away from his sleeping team boots crunching on gravel and pressed the device to his ear. Her voice arrived fragmented, distorted by distance and fear. The connection crackled. Corporate event, important clients. She'd wanted to leave an hour ago, but they kept pouring drinks, kept insisting. Now they were suggesting an after-party at someone's hotel suite. Business development, they called it. Networking opportunities. Her boss had made it clear that leaving early would reflect poorly on her commitment. Jack's throat constricted. 8,000 miles separated them. He could dismantle an IED, clear a hostile building, extract civilians from combat zones, but he couldn't reach through the satellite connection and pull his wife to safety. His words came urgent, clipped. Leave now. Take a cab. Don't go to any secondary location. I'll call you in 10 minutes to make sure you're home. The line went silent for 3 seconds. Then Sarah's voice returned steadier, agreeing. She'd make an excuse slip out. Everything would be fine. She loved him. He told her he loved her too, told her to text him the moment she was in the taxi, promised to call as soon as his team reached the next checkpoint where signal wouldn't compromise their position. That was the last time he heard her voice. 47 minutes later, his phone received no text. When he finally established another secure connection, an hour after that, her phone went straight to voicemail. He called their apartment landline. No answer. He contacted Sarah's sister, her best friend, anyone who might know where she was. Nobody had heard from her. The knot in his stomach transformed into something cold and metallic. Military protocol dictated he couldn't abandon his post. His commanding officer assured him they'd contact local authorities, make inquiries. Jack paced the perimeter of their temporary base, watching the sun rise over mountains that suddenly felt like prison walls. His team moved out at 0600. He had no choice but to move with them. The official call reached him 16 hours after Sarah's last words. Hotel room at the Grandview Plaza. Empty prescription bottles. The medical examiner's preliminary assessment suggested overdose. Witnesses, 3 executives from her firm's client company, claimed she'd been drinking heavily, seemed depressed, mentioned feeling overwhelmed. They tried to help, they said, tried to get her to sleep it off. By the time they checked on her, she wasn't breathing. Tragic accident. Corporate condolences. Her firm sent flowers. Jack requested emergency leave. Flew commercial from Bagram to Frankfurt to Atlanta to Richmond. Attended a funeral where colleagues spoke about Sarah's dedication, her bright future, what a terrible loss. He stood beside her casket in his dress uniform and listened to people who'd been at that party describe his wife as troubled, struggling, someone who'd hidden her pain so well. Their sympathy tasted like poison. The investigation yielded nothing. Security footage from the hotel showed Sarah entering the building with the 3 men, all appearing consensual. Room service logs confirmed they had ordered alcohol. The prescription bottles matched medications Sarah had legitimately received for occasional anxiety, nothing that should have caused an overdose unless taken in massive quantities. No signs of forced entry to the room, no defensive wounds, no witnesses contradicting the executive's account. Insufficient evidence to pursue criminal charges. Case closed, life insurance paid out. Colleagues moved on. Jack didn't. He reviewed the evidence himself during the 30 days of bereavement leave the Army granted him. Spoke to the bartender at the initial event who remembered Sarah asking for water, not more wine. Tracked down a hotel housekeeper who'd found Sarah's purse in a hallway trash can, odd for someone voluntarily going to a party. Retrieved Sarah's phone records, discovered she'd tried calling him 7 more times after their initial conversation. 7 attempts at reaching across 8,000 miles. 7 cries for help he never received because he'd been moving through a mountain pass with no signal. None of it constituted proof. The district attorney declined to reopen the case. The executive's lawyer sent a cease and desist letter when Jack attempted to contact them directly. Sarah's firm quietly settled with a non-disclosure agreement attached. Her family took the money. Jack refused. He had a different payment in mind, one that couldn't be deposited in a bank account. But he also had a daughter. Lila was 5 years old when her mother died, old enough to understand absence, but too young to comprehend forever. She asked when Mommy was coming home why Daddy looked so sad, whether she'd done something wrong. Jack knelt beside her bed night after night and tried to explain what he barely understood himself, that sometimes bad people hurt good people, and sometimes the world doesn't fix it the way it should. He resigned his commission 6 weeks after the funeral. The Army offered counseling, alternative assignments, encouragement to reconsider. Jack signed the papers and walked away from the only career he'd known. 16 years of service, 3 combat deployments, a Bronze Star, and 2 Purple Hearts, all traded for the chance to never again be 8,000 miles away when someone he loved needed him. The first year passed in a fog of single parenthood and mounting debts. Sarah's death benefits covered the mortgage barely. Jack worked security at a shopping mall night shifts that paid $18 an hour and left him hollow-eyed at Lila's breakfast table. She started first grade. He attended every parent-teacher conference, every school assembly, every moment he'd missed during deployments. Lila drew pictures of families with a mother, a father, a daughter, and then began drawing just a father and daughter. The 3-person families went into her desk drawer out of sight. Jack didn't date, didn't socialize, didn't do anything that might require him to trust another institution, another system that had failed when it mattered most. He existed in a carefully controlled radius home schoolwork. Lila's world became his world, and he built walls around both of them, made of vigilance and routine. Then a friend from his military days, someone who transitioned to private security, mentioned a position. Executive protection detail, but mostly just driving. Company called Voss Industries' young CEO, who'd had some stalker issues last year, needed someone reliable. Decent pay, better than mall security, day shift mostly. Health insurance. His friend vouched for him, sent his resume. The interview lasted 12 minutes. Clara Voss sat behind a desk made of glass and steel, her posture rigid, her questions direct. Previous experience, military 16 years, force protection and reconnaissance. Why leave family circumstances? Available for irregular hours within reason. Comfortable with confidentiality. He'd held a top secret clearance. That seemed sufficient. She hired him on the spot. 2 weeks notice to the mall background check processing, and Jack became a driver. Black suit, black sedan, black coffee in a thermos. He picked Clara up at 7:45 each morning, drove her to the office, waited, drove her to meetings, waited more, returned her home between 7 and 9 each evening. Sometimes later, occasionally much later. He didn't mind waiting. Waiting meant Lila was home from school doing homework at their kitchen table safe. He'd installed security cameras throughout their apartment, monitoring apps on his phone. Between driving assignments, he checked the feeds, watched his daughter read books, or draw pictures, or make herself a snack. The nanny he'd hired for after-school hours knew to text if anything unusual occurred. Nothing ever did. Routine became religion. Clara Voss didn't speak to him beyond professional necessity. Destination addresses, timing changes, brief acknowledgments. Jack preferred it that way. He wasn't there to forge connections or navigate office politics. He was there to do a job that paid $58,000 a year, plus benefits enough to move Lila into a better school district, enough to start saving for her college education, enough to never feel 8,000 miles away again. 6 months into the position, he'd learned Clara's patterns with the same precision he'd once applied to enemy movements. She took the same route to work, Memorial Boulevard to 8th Avenue to the underground parking garage. She attended board meetings every Thursday at 9. She lunched alone at her desk 4 days a week, sushi delivered from Tanaka's on Wednesdays. Friday afternoons meant video conferences with West Coast partners. She worked late on Mondays and Tuesdays reviewing quarterly reports. She never attended happy hours with her executive team. She declined dinner invitations from board members. She existed in her own controlled radius, different from Jack's, but equally fortified. He noticed other things too. Details people rarely observed about their employers. Clara checked her surroundings before exiting buildings, eyes scanning parking lots and sidewalks. She carried pepper spray in her purse, kept it in the outer pocket for quick access. She never got into elevators alone, with men she didn't know always waited for one with other women, or rode separately. Her apartment building had 3 security measures, keycard, doorman, and keypad, and she varied which entrance she used, never establishing a predictable pattern. Someone had taught her to be careful, or someone had taught her why being careful mattered. Jack didn't ask. Clara didn't volunteer. They maintained professional distance, an employer and employee, 2 people occupying the same space without intersecting beyond necessity. It worked. For 6 months it worked. November arrived with early darkness and the kind of cold that reminded Jack of mountain deployments. Lila's school held a Thanksgiving pageant. She played a settler 4 whole lines memorized. Jack requested the afternoon off 2 weeks in advance. Clara approved it without comment, rearranged her schedule. He sat in the elementary school auditorium, recording every moment on his phone, watching his daughter speak her lines with solemn concentration. Afterwards, she asked if Mommy would have been proud. Jack told her Mommy was watching from somewhere even better than the third-row center seat. They got ice cream even though it was 37 degrees outside. Lila ordered mint chocolate chip, same as Sarah used to. Jack got vanilla, let his daughter's joy fill spaces that grief had carved hollow. He checked his watch at 5:15, calculated drive time, texted the nanny that he'd be home by 6. Routine maintained. Walls secure. His phone buzzed at 5:40. Clara's executive assistant message marked urgent. Change of plans. Company hosting a celebration event tonight. Investors and partners Clara needed to attend. Car service required by 7:30. Formal attire. Duration estimated 3 to 4 hours. Apologies for short notice. Double overtime pay authorized. Jack's jaw tightened. He looked at Lila, chocolate ice cream on her upper lip, still talking about the pageant. The nanny could stay later. He'd done evening events before returned home after Lila was asleep, kissed her forehead, and checked the locks, and slept 3 hours before the morning routine began again. It wasn't ideal. Nothing about this life was ideal, but it paid the bills, and keeping his daughter safe meant maintaining employment. He texted confirmation. 7:30 pickup. He'd be there. Lila's face fell when he explained he had to work tonight. Just for a few hours, Mrs. Chen would stay with her. She nodded, brave little soldier. Daddy had to work. Mommy used to work late too, she understood. 8 years old and already fluent in disappointment. Jack drove her home, called Mrs. Chen, confirmed the evening rate. He changed into his formal suit, the one he wore for weddings and funerals, pressed and ready. Checked the security cameras one more time. Kissed Lila's forehead. Promised to be home before she woke up. Drove across the city to Clara's apartment building, arrived 7:27. Clara emerged at 7:34, 4 minutes late, wearing a red dress that probably cost more than Jack's monthly rent. Her hair was styled makeup, carefully applied, but her shoulders carried tension, like she was heading into combat rather than a party. She slid into the back seat without greeting. The Grandview Plaza Hotel, top floor ballroom, valet parking available. Jack knew the building. Of course he knew the building. He'd driven past it 100 times in 3 years, never stopping, never looking too long at the windows on the 14th floor where Sarah had died. Clara didn't know. Nobody at Voss Industries knew about his history, his loss, his reason for becoming someone who drove people to places and waited and watched. That was the point. He'd built walls to keep the past contained, to keep the present focused on Lila, to keep the future from feeling like an 8,000-mile distance. He pulled up to the valet stand. A young man in a red vest opened Clara's door. She stepped out, smoothed her dress, transformed from tense executive into poised CEO. Another mask different from Jack's uniform, in silence but serving the same purpose. Protection through performance. The valet attendant gestured toward the parking structure. Jack declined. He'd wait in the car, curbside engine, running. The attendant frowned, mentioned regulations about idling vehicles. Jack's expression didn't change. He'd been a military officer, learned how to make suggestions sound like orders without raising his voice. The attendant backed off. Clara disappeared through the hotel's revolving doors. Jack settled into his seat, adjusted mirrors, prepared for 3 to 4 hours of waiting. His phone showed 8:03. Lila would be brushing her teeth now. Mrs. Chen helping with the back molars. Bath time at 8:15. Story at 8:30. Lights out by 9. He'd confirmed the routine twice before leaving. Mrs. Chen had raised 4 children of her own, came with excellent references, knew CPR and the Heimlich maneuver. Lila was safe. Jack pulled up the security camera app anyway. Watched his daughter in her bathroom, foaming toothbrush moving in circles. She made faces at herself in the mirror, crossed her eyes, stuck out her tongue. Small acts of silliness when adults weren't watching. His chest tightened with something between affection and guilt. She deserved better than a father who worked late hours protecting someone else's CEO while Mrs. Chen supervised bedtime. But she also deserved food and shelter and education and safety. Compromises came with the territory of single parenthood. Sarah would have understood. Sarah had understood all those times Jack deployed, left her alone, chose duty over presence. He'd promised her during their last phone call that he'd always protect their daughter. Keeping that promise meant enduring hotel parking lots on November evenings when he'd rather be reading bedtime stories. The Grandview Plaza's entrance remained busy. Well-dressed people arriving for the Voss Industries event, expensive suits and designer dresses, valet attendants scrambling. Jack recognized a few faces from his months driving Clara. Board members, senior executives, investors whose names appeared in her calendar with alarming frequency. They moved through the revolving doors carrying bottles of wine and congratulatory smiles, ready to celebrate whatever deal had been closed, whatever profits had been secured. Jack checked the time. 8:41. Lila should be in bed now. Mrs. Chen reading the chapter book they'd started Monday. 2 more chapters until the protagonist escaped the enchanted forest. Lila had been anxious to find out what happened. Jack had promised to read it with her this weekend, every chapter straight through. A father-daughter marathon. His phone buzzed. Text from Mrs. Chen. Lila's asleep. All good here, see you later. Jack typed a response. Thank you, home by midnight? Extra hour at evening rate. Mrs. Chen sent a thumbs-up emoji. Jack returned his attention to the hotel entrance. 9 o'clock passed, 9:30. The valet stand grew quieter, fewer arrivals. Through the lobby windows, Jack could see the party in full swing, bodies moving on what must be the top-floor ballroom lights changing color. He imagined champagne flowing, speeches being made, deals being discussed. 10 o'clock, Jack's back ached from sitting. He stepped out, stretched, walked a small perimeter around the sedan. The November air bit through his suit jacket. He should have brought the heavier coat, but that lived in the trunk for emergencies, and leaving the vehicle unattended to retrieve it broke his own protocols. Vehicles were vulnerable points. Always maintain line of sight. Always be ready to move. A group of men exited the hotel laughing loudly. Jack recognized one Richard Cross investment firm executive had attended 3 meetings with Clara over the past month. Tall, graying at the temples, expensive watch. The kind of man who expected deference and received it. His companions looked similar, interchangeable in their tailored suits and cultivated confidence. They stood near the valet stand discussing some business matter, gesturing with wine glasses they'd apparently brought outside. One of them was talking too loudly, words slurring slightly. The CEO's drunk. Did you see her stumbling all over the place? Cross laughed. She's fine, just celebrating. We should go back in, make sure she doesn't make any poor decisions. The group laughed. Poor decisions like turning down our investment offer. Exactly. Jack's hands clenched. He forced them to relax. Not his concern. Clara was an adult capable of managing her own social situations. He was the driver, not her guardian. Professional boundaries existed for reasons, but something in Cross's tone, the way his companions chuckled, sent familiar warnings through Jack's nervous system. He'd heard men talk this way before in contexts where bad intentions preceded bad actions. The laughter that wasn't quite humor, the suggestions that weren't quite suggestions. Cross and his group returned inside. Jack remained by his vehicle, tension coiling in his shoulders. He pulled out his phone, checked the security feed from home. Lila's bedroom showed an empty bed, covers pulled back. His heart rate spiked before logic caught up. Bathroom. He switched cameras. There she was, getting a glass of water, Mrs. Chen standing in the doorway. Everything fine. Everything routine. Jack switched back to the hotel entrance camera view on his phone. He didn't have access to the hotel's interior, but he'd learned to watch patterns, read situations through limited information. 10:47. Clara had said 3 to 4 hours. They were approaching the 4-hour mark. Events like this usually wound down around 11 people dispersing to after parties or home. Clara never attended after parties. She'd be out soon. 10:53. Groups began trickling out, some calling for cars, others walking toward the parking garage. Jack straightened, watching for red dress and tired executive. Instead, he saw Cross and his companions again standing near the entrance, smoking cigars, looking back through the doors, as if waiting for something. Waiting for someone. Jack's instincts screamed at him. The same instincts that had kept him alive through 3 combat deployments, that had warned him about IEDs before his team spotted them, that had pulled him left instead of right in a firefight that saved his life. Something was wrong, something in the way Cross kept checking his watch, the way his companions positioned themselves near the doors, the way they weren't actually leaving despite standing outside for 10 minutes. 11 o'clock. Jack made a decision that violated every professional boundary he'd established. He left his vehicle, crossed the valet area, pushed through the revolving doors into the Grandview Plaza's lobby. The desk clerk glanced up, began to ask if he needed assistance. Jack kept walking toward the elevators. Top floor ballroom. He'd been military learned how to move through spaces with purpose, how to make people assume he belonged wherever he was going. The elevator took 30 seconds to rise 14 floors. 30 seconds where Jack questioned his own judgment, wondered if he was overreacting, letting paranoia override professionalism. Clara probably didn't want him showing up at her event. She'd probably be annoyed, maybe even angry enough to fire him. But his gut said otherwise, and Jack had learned 3 years ago that ignoring his gut cost lives. The elevator doors opened onto a hallway decorated with crystal chandeliers and framed art. Music pulsed from double doors ahead the ballroom. Jack approached, pushed through. The party was winding down. Maybe 50 people remained from what had likely been 200. Waitstaff collected empty glasses and plates. A DJ packed equipment. Clusters of executives stood talking sealing deals and making promises. Jack scanned the room, searching for red dress. Found her. Clara stood near the far wall, surrounded by 5 men, Cross and his companions plus 2 others. They formed a loose circle around her, blocking her path to the exit. Wine glasses in every hand except Clara's. Hers sat empty on a nearby table. She was smiling, but Jack recognized the smile. The fake one. The one she used during difficult negotiations when someone was pushing too hard. One of the men, not Cross, someone younger, more aggressive, had his hand on Clara's arm. She pulled back slightly. He held on, leaning closer to whisper something. Clara's smile tightened. She shook her head. The man laughed loud enough to carry across the ballroom. "Come on, we're all friends here. Just one more drink. We're celebrating." Clara tried to step around him. Another man shifted, blocking her path. Not obviously nothing that would look confrontational to casual observers, just a repositioning that happened to cut off her exit. Clara's eyes darted, searching for escape routes. She was calculating angles, assessing threats, trapped in a social situation that was rapidly transforming into something else. Jack crossed the ballroom. Not running, not drawing attention, just moving with steady purpose. He'd done this before in different contexts, extracting civilians from hostile situations, intervening before escalation, creating exits where none existed. His training wasn't just about combat, it was about recognizing patterns, disrupting them before they reached their logical conclusions. He reached the group. The men noticed him, confusion crossing their faces. Clara's gaze snapped to his surprise, and something else, relief maybe, or fear that he'd witnessed her vulnerability. Jack's voice came quiet, professional. "Miss Voss, your car is ready." The aggressive man turned, annoyed. "We're not done here. She's having a good time." "Or aren't you having a good time?" Clara's voice wavered slightly. "I should go. Early meeting tomorrow." Cross stepped forward, smiling. His tone carried authority, someone used to being obeyed. "Clara, we were just discussing the partnership terms. Important business. Your driver can wait." Jack met Clara's eyes. The silent question passed between them. Did she want out, or was he overstepping? Her jaw tensed, a tiny nod, barely perceptible. Jack turned his attention to Cross, professional respect in every word, but steel underneath. "With all due respect, Sir, Miss Voss has an early commitment. The car is waiting at valet. We should leave now." The aggressive man scoffed. "Who are you, her bodyguard? You're the driver. Go wait in the car like you're supposed to." Jack's expression didn't change. Ma'am. Clara moved before anyone could respond. She stepped around the aggressive man, who was now arguing with Jack, and reached the clear path Jack had created simply by positioning himself between her and the group. She walked toward the ballroom doors. Jack followed, maintaining position between Clara and the men, not looking back. Behind them, voices rose. Laughter, but the mocking kind. "What's the rush? Look at her running away with her driver." Cross's voice calm and pleasant. "Let her go, gentlemen. We'll continue the conversation tomorrow, when she's more reasonable." Jack felt Clara flinch at those words. He kept walking. Through the ballroom doors, down the hallway, into the elevator. Clara leaned against the mirrored wall, eyes closed, breathing too fast. Jack watched the floor numbers descend and said nothing. Sometimes silence provided more support than words. The lobby passed in a blur. Jack guided Clara toward the revolving doors, through them to the valet stand where his sedan waited. He opened the rear door. Clara slid in her composure, cracking. Jack closed the door, gently walked around to the driver's seat, pulled away from the curb. 3 blocks from the hotel, Clara spoke for the first time. Her voice was thick, emotional. "Thank you." Jack adjusted the rearview mirror, met her eyes in the reflection. "You're welcome, ma'am." Another block in silence. Then Clara's voice, again quieter. "How did you know what, ma'am?" "That I needed help. I didn't call, I didn't text." Jack considered his response. Professional detachment word with honesty. "You looked uncomfortable. I came to check." Clara let out a sound that might have been a laugh or a uncomfortable. That's one word for it. Jack said nothing. Let her process however she needed. Clara's next words came slowly. "They wanted me to go to an after party at Richard Cross's hotel suite. Said we needed to discuss the partnership terms in private. I kept saying no, but they kept pushing. More wine, more pressure. I was starting to think I'd have to cause a scene, and that would be worse for business than just going along." Jack's hands tightened on the steering wheel. His voice stayed even. "You don't have to go along with anything." "I know." Clara sounded exhausted. "But sometimes the cost of saying no is higher than the pain of just enduring." "Do you understand?" Jack understood. He understood more than Clara realized. He'd spent 3 years understanding exactly what happened when women tried to say no and nobody was there to back them up. They drove in silence. Jack took side streets instead of the highway, giving Clara time to compose herself before reaching her building. The city lights blurred past holiday decorations already appearing in storefronts despite Thanksgiving still being 2 weeks away. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that other people navigated predators disguised as business partners. At a red light, Clara spoke again. "They'll call tomorrow. My assistant will have messages about me being unprofessional, walking out of important discussions. Richard Cross will probably threaten to pull his investment. The board will ask why I couldn't just network like everyone else." "You're the CEO," Jack said. "They work for you." Clara's laugh held no humor. "That's not how it works when you're a woman running a tech company. You're always proving yourself, always walking a line between assertive and aggressive, friendly and flirtatious, competent and cold. And men like Richard Cross know exactly how to exploit that line." The light changed. Jack accelerated. "Then fire them." Clara didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice carried weary resignation. "It's not that simple. Cross controls 14% of our operating capital. His firm has connections to 3 other major investors. If he pulls out, others follow. The company could survive, but the stock would tank. The board would demand explanations. Competitors would smell blood." Jack pulled up to Clara's apartment building. The doorman hurried forward, opening Clara's door before Jack could exit the vehicle. Clara stepped out, unsteady, the alcohol and stress catching up. She paused, leaning down to meet Jack's eyes through the open door. "I'm sorry you had to see that tonight. It wasn't professional." "You have nothing to apologize for, ma'am." Clara's eyes filled with tears. She was too proud or too exhausted to let fall. "Still, thank you for staying." Jack nodded. The doorman closed the door. Clara disappeared into her building. Jack waited until she was inside, past the doorman into the elevator. Then he pulled away, heading toward the parking garage exit. His phone showed 11:43, earlier than expected. He'd be home before midnight, could check on Lila, maybe get 6 hours of sleep before tomorrow's shift. Professional boundaries maintained. Job completed. But something nagged at him. Cross and his companions had known Clara's apartment building, or at least seemed confident about where she lived. They discussed continuing the conversation tomorrow. Men like that didn't let rejection go easily. They reframed it as delay, as negotiation, as the first round of a game they intended to win. Jack circled the block, told himself he was being paranoid, told himself it was none of his business, told himself Clara was safe now inside her building with 3 security measures and a doorman and locked doors. Told himself the same things he'd told himself 3 years ago when Sarah called from a party and said she felt uncomfortable. He parked half a block from Clara's building where he could see the entrance without being obvious. Just 5 minutes. just until he was certain nobody followed. Then he'd go home to Lila and Mrs. Chen and the routine that kept both of them safe. 11:57. The street was quiet. A taxi passed, dropping off an elderly couple at the building next door. The doorman helped them with luggage. Regular city life, regular evening activities. 12:03. A black sedan pulled up to Clara's building. Three men got out. Jack recognized them immediately, Cross's companions from the party. The aggressive one who'd grabbed Clara's arm. Two others. They stood on the sidewalk, looking up at the building, talking among themselves. Jack's heartbeat accelerated. He pulled out his phone, started recording through the windshield. The video wouldn't be perfect, but it would capture faces, license plate, timestamps. One of the men tried the building's entrance. Locked keycard required. He rattled the door. The others laughed. The aggressive one pulled out his phone, made a call, waited, hung up after nobody answered. He tried the building's call box, scrolling through resident names, apparently looking for Clara's apartment. The doorman had disappeared inside, probably helping the elderly couple with their luggage. The three men conferred, debating something. Then they settled in to wait, standing near the entrance, casual but clearly loitering. One lit a cigarette, another checked his watch. The aggressive one kept looking up at the building's windows, counting floors. 12:17, 12:23. The men showed no signs of leaving. They'd followed Clara home. They were waiting for their opportunity, doorman distraction. Another resident entering who might hold the door, some chance to get inside. And then what Jack's imagination supplied answers he didn't want to consider. At 12:31, Cross's sedan pulled up. Richard Cross himself emerged, joined the other three. They talked, gestured toward the building, laughed about something. Cross checked his watch, looked annoyed. One of the others made a call, listened, shook his head. Clara wasn't answering. She'd probably gone straight to bed, turned off her phone, tried to forget the evening. She had no idea four men stood outside her building, discussing how to reach her apartment. Jack made a decision. He stepped out of his sedan, crossed the street, approached the group with his phone still recording in his jacket pocket. Professional expression, polite tone. "Gentlemen, can I help you?" The men turned. Recognition dawned on Cross's face. "You're Clara's driver. What are you still doing here?" Making sure Miss Voss arrived home safely. Cross smiled, the kind of smile predators used before striking. "Well, she did. Thank you. You can go now." Jack didn't move. "Are you waiting for someone?" "We're waiting for Clara," the aggressive one said. "We have business to discuss, important business that couldn't wait. It's past midnight. Perhaps you could schedule a meeting through her office." Cross's smile hardened. "Perhaps you could mind your own business. You're the help. We're her partners. Know your place." Jack's voice remained even, but something in his posture shifted. Military training coming forward, the part of him that had commanded soldiers and negotiated with tribal elders and stared down enemy combatants. "My place is ensuring Miss Voss's safety. She's off the clock. If you want to meet with her, contact her assistant. Arrange something appropriate." One of Cross's companions stepped closer, deliberately invading Jack's space. "Or what? You'll stop us?" Jack didn't retreat. He met the man's eyes with the kind of calm that came from knowing he could dismantle all four of them before they understood what was happening. But violence wasn't necessary here. Just presence. Just the clear message that they'd been seen, recorded, confronted. "I'll suggest you leave before I call the police and report suspicious individuals loitering outside a residential building at midnight." Cross's expression shifted, calculation replacing irritation. He'd realized that Jack wasn't just a driver who could be dismissed with a harsh word. He was something else, something that didn't intimidate easily. "Fine, we're leaving, but tell Clara we'll be in touch tomorrow. The partnership terms need resolution." "Through proper channels," Jack said. The men returned to their vehicles. Two cars, the black sedan and a BMW. They drove off in different directions. Jack waited until both were out of sight, then waited another 5 minutes. When neither returned, he crossed back to his own car. His phone showed 12:47. The video evidence was stored. Four men, their vehicles, their license plates, their intentions clear enough for anyone paying attention. Jack downloaded the video to a secure backup, tagged it with date and timestamp. Maybe it would matter. Maybe it wouldn't. But at least it existed. He drove home. The streets were empty cities settling into the quiet hours between midnight and dawn. His mind replayed the evening, analyzing decisions, questioning whether he'd handled things correctly. Professional boundaries said he should have stayed in the car at the hotel, waited for Clara to call if she needed help. Professional boundaries said he definitely shouldn't have returned to her building, shouldn't have confronted Cross and his companions. But professional boundaries hadn't saved Sarah. Rules and protocols and proper channels hadn't prevented three men from convincing her to go to a hotel room. Following procedure hadn't yielded justice afterward. Sometimes professional boundaries were just excuses for looking away. Jack arrived home at 1:14. Mrs. Chen was dozing on his couch, woke when he entered. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Jack said. He paid her the agreed rate plus an extra 20. Lila sleep through, out like a light, read 3 chapters instead of 2. She really wanted to know what happened next. Jack smiled. "That's my girl." "Thank you, Mrs. Chen." After the nanny left, Jack checked every lock, every window, looked in on Lila sleeping peacefully, stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. He stood in her doorway for a full minute, watching her breathe, reminding himself why he'd taken this job, why he drove Clara Voss instead of pursuing the men who'd killed his wife. Because Lila needed a father, not a vendetta. Because he couldn't change the past, but he could change how he responded to the present. Because the world wouldn't be fixed by one person's revenge, but maybe it could be improved by one person's refusal to look away. Jack changed out of his suit, set his alarm for 6:30. Lila had weekend homework to finish before school Monday. He'd promised to take her to the park if weather permitted. Normal life, normal routine. The walls he'd built around their existence held firm. He checked his phone one last time before sleeping. No messages from Clara, no calls from the office. The evening had ended officially. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought, consequences or continuation, anger or appreciation. Jack would handle it the way he handled everything. Professionally, quietly, with Lila's needs always first. But as he lay in bed, sleep slow to arrive, his mind kept returning to Clara's face in the ballroom. The fake smile, the trapped expression, the relief when he'd appeared. And later in the car, the exhaustion that came from constantly navigating predators, constantly calculating wild, constantly choosing between dignity and survival. He thought about Sarah's last phone call, the fear in her voice, the way she'd agreed to go to the after party because her boss had made it clear that refusing would harm her career, the choice she'd made that cost her life. He thought about the hotel room 14 floors up in the Grandview Plaza, where something had happened that night 3 years ago, something the investigation never uncovered, something the men involved had successfully buried beneath lies and corporate settlements. And he thought about Cross and his companions standing outside Clara's building at midnight, discussing how to reach her apartment, planning their next move in a game she hadn't consented to play. Jack didn't sleep much. When his alarm sounded at 6:30, he rose immediately, muscle memory from military years. Showered, dressed in civilian clothes for the weekend, started coffee, made pancakes for Lila, her favorite Saturday breakfast. She emerged from her bedroom at 7:15, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Daddy, you're home." She hugged his leg. "Told you I would be." Jack ruffled her hair. "How was the rest of the evening?" "Good." Mrs. Chen read extra chapters. The protagonist almost got caught by the witch, but she hid in a hollow tree. Smart protagonist. Jack plated pancakes, added strawberries and syrup. "What's on your agenda today?" Lila launched into detailed plans involving her dolls in an elaborate game she'd invented where they ran a restaurant. Jack listened, asked appropriate questions, kept one eye on his phone. Clara might call, might text, or she might decide last night's intervention was inappropriate, file a complaint. He'd be looking for a new job by Monday. 8:30 passed. 9. 9:30. No word. Jack helped Lila with math homework while his mind ran scenarios. Best case, Clara appreciated his actions, said nothing, they continued as before. Worst case, Clara felt he'd overstepped, viewed his presence at her building as invasive, terminated his employment. Middle cases existed in infinite variation between those extremes. At 10:17, his phone buzzed. Text from Clara's assistant. "Miss Voss needs to speak with you. Are you available for a call?" Jack's stomach tightened. He texted confirmation. "Available now." 30 seconds later, his phone rang. Clara's voice, and she sounded different. Not the tired executive from last night, not the professional CEO from work. Something raw or more uncertain. Jack, I need to see you. Can you come to my apartment? This didn't sound like a termination. It sounded like something else. Of course, ma'am. When now, if possible. Jack glanced at Lila deep into her homework. I can be there in 45 minutes. Thank you. Clara paused. And Jack? This isn't work-related. I mean it is, but it's not. I'll explain when you get here. The call ended. Jack stood still for 5 seconds processing. Then he called. Mrs. Chen asked if she could come sit with Lila for a few hours. Emergency meeting with his employer. Mrs. Chen arrived 20 minutes later. Jack kissed Lila goodbye, promised to be back for lunch. The drive to Clara's building took 37 minutes, midday Saturday traffic lighter than weekdays. Jack parked in a visitor spot, approached the entrance. Different doorman, today, older professional. He called up to Clara's apartment, received confirmation, admitted Jack to the elevator. 14th floor. Jack's military mind noted the number suppressed the memories it triggered. Different building, different situation, different outcome. Clara answered her door before Jack could knock. She wore casual clothes, jeans, sweater, no makeup. Her eyes were red rimmed, swollen. She'd been crying probably for hours. Come in. She stepped aside. Jack entered. The apartment looked exactly as it had last night, when he'd brought Clara home drunk and vulnerable. Expensive furniture, no photos, cold despite the heating system. Clara gestured toward the couch. Coffee, tea. I'm fine, thank you. Clara sat in the chair across from him, the same chair where Jack had spent 6 hours last night. Watching over her, she seemed to notice, looked at the chair differently. I watched the security footage. Her voice cracked slightly. All of it. Building exterior, lobby, the apartment cameras, everything. Jack waited. Let her say what she needed to say. Clara leaned forward, hands clasped together. You sat in that chair all night, 6 hours, never moved except to check the window. Never came close to the couch. Never touched anything except to get me water. Just sat there watching over me while I slept off the alcohol and stress. Yes, ma'am, and when I woke up confused and scared and accused you of things you didn't do, you just left. Didn't defend yourself. Didn't argue. Just walked away. You were frightened. Jack's tone remained neutral. People react when they're vulnerable. I understood that. Clara's eyes filled with tears. But I didn't just accuse you. I threw you out, called you a threat, treated you like you were one of them, and you just spent the entire night protecting me. Jack said nothing. What response existed that wouldn't minimize her guilt or inflate his role? Clara wiped her eyes. The footage showed something else. The exterior cameras. Around midnight, 3 men came to my building. They tried to get in. They waited. They made phone calls. Then Richard Cross showed up. Jack's expression didn't change. And then you showed up. Clara's voice strengthened. You were in your car parked down the block. You saw them. You approached them. You confronted them. The audio's not great, but the video shows you standing between them and my building, talking to them until they left. I wanted to ensure they weren't a threat. Clara let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. They were absolutely a threat, Jack. They followed me home. They planned to get into my apartment. I was passed out drunk, and they were outside my door, and if you hadn't been there, if you hadn't stayed, hadn't watched. She broke off, covering her face with both hands. Jack remained seated, giving her space to process. After a moment, Clara lowered her hands, met his eyes directly. Why didn't you tell me when I was yelling at you, throwing you out? You could have said, by the way, I just saved you from 4 men who were trying to break into your apartment. You could have defended yourself. Would you have believed me? The question hung between them. Clara opened her mouth, closed it. Honesty won. Probably not. I was scared, confused. Anything you said would have sounded like an excuse. Exactly. Jack's voice was gentle. You needed to feel safe. My presence, however well-intentioned, was making you feel unsafe. So I left. That was the right choice. But I was wrong. Clara's tears fell freely now. I was so wrong about you. You're the most honorable person I've ever met, and I treated you like a criminal. You treated me like a woman protecting herself. There's no shame in that. Clara shook her head, frustrated. Stop being so understanding. I hurt you. I accused you. You deserve an apology. A real one. So I'm sorry, Jack. I'm deeply, profoundly sorry for what I said, for how I treated you, for not trusting that you were trying to help. Jack accepted this with a small nod. Apology accepted. They sat in silence. Outside Clara's windows, the city continued its Saturday routine. Cars honked, people walked dogs. Life proceeded oblivious to the small healing happening in this expensive apartment. Finally, Clara spoke again, quieter now. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you come back to my building, I mean? You'd already helped me at the hotel, driven me home. Your shift was over. You could have gone home to your daughter. Why stay? Jack considered his answer carefully. Because I've seen what happens when nobody stays. Clara frowned. What do you mean Jack had kept his past buried for 3 years? Maintained walls, protected himself and Lila inside routines and professional distance. But Clara had shared her vulnerability last night, however unwillingly. Perhaps she deserved some vulnerability in return. My wife, Sarah, she died 3 years ago. Clara's breath caught. Oh, Jack, I didn't know. I'm so sorry. Jack continued, voice steady despite the old pain rising. She was at a company event, sales celebration, important clients, lots of drinking. She called me that night, said she felt uncomfortable. Some of the clients were being inappropriate. I was overseas military deployment. I told her to leave, go home. She tried, but they convinced her to go to an after party. Said it would be bad for business if she left. Clara's hand moved to her mouth. She called me again at 2 in the morning, said she needed help. I was 8,000 miles away. I couldn't do anything. Jack paused, memories sharp and cutting. By the time the police arrived, it was too late. They found her in a hotel room. Overdose. The men claimed she took the pills herself. Investigation went nowhere. Insufficient evidence, Jack. Clara whispered. I don't know what to say. There's nothing to say. Jack met her eyes. I'm telling you this because you asked why I came back, why I stayed. It's because I know what happens when nobody's there, when people look away, when women try to say no and there's no one to back them up. I wasn't there for Sarah. I can't change that. But I can make sure what happened to her doesn't happen to anyone else. Clara was crying again, harder now. That's why you took this job. Why you're just a driver when you were a military officer. Why you're so careful, so vigilant. It's why I do a lot of things. Jack allowed himself a small, sad smile. My daughter Lila, she's 8. She asks about her mom every day. I tell her that her mom was brave, that she stood up for what was right, that we honor her by doing the same. And I promised myself that I would never again be in a position where I couldn't protect someone who needed it. The apartment fell silent. Clara wiped her eyes, struggling to compose herself. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. The men last night, Richard Cross and his friends. You knew what they were planning, I suspected. Jack's tone hardened slightly. Men like that don't follow women home at midnight with good intentions. They were waiting for an opportunity. Maybe they would have given up. Maybe not. I wasn't willing to find out. Clara nodded slowly. I need to do something about them. About Richard Cross. About what almost happened. That's your decision. No, Clara's voice strengthened. It's the right decision. But I'll need evidence. The security footage from last night from my building. Do you still have your phone recordings? Can I have it? I'm going to compile everything. Building security footage. Your video timestamps. I'm going to show the board exactly who Richard Cross is. Jack pulled out his phone, transferred the file to Clara's laptop. She watched it play out, 4 men outside her building. Their intentions clear. Jack confronting them until they left. This is enough, Clara said quietly. Combined with the building footage, the hotel camera's witness statements. This proves they followed me with malicious intent. The board will have to act. Cross will fight back. Jack's military training supplied tactical assessments. He'll claim it was misunderstood. Business discussions. He'll have lawyers. Let him. Clara's CEO persona emerged cold and strategic. I have evidence. I have documentation. And I have a platform. The press will be very interested in a story about prominent investors stalking a female CEO. His reputation will be destroyed before his lawyers file the first motion. Jack nodded. Good. But, Clara looked at him seriously, this means you'll probably be called to testify if it goes to court. Your involvement will be public. Your past will likely come up. Are you comfortable with that? Jack considered. His past was his business, something he'd kept private to protect Lila from constant reminders of her mother's death. But maybe privacy was just another word for silence. And silence had protected the men who'd killed Sarah. If it helps stop Cross and men like him, I'm comfortable with whatever's necessary. Clara's expression softened. Thank you for everything. For last night, for protecting me, for trusting me with your story. Jack stood. I should go. My daughter's waiting. Clara stood too. Before you leave, I want you to know something. You're not just my driver. You're the most honorable man I've ever met. And after I deal with Richard Cross, I'm offering you a promotion. Ma'am, that's not necessary. It's not about necessity. Clara's voice was firm. I'm starting a new program, company-funded transportation for any employee who needs it. Day or night, no questions asked. Safe ride home for anyone who feels unsafe. And I want you to run it. Director of Safety, salary increase benefits, flexible hours so you can spend more time with Lila. Jack felt something unfamiliar. Hope maybe, or validation. The idea that his vigilance, his refusal to look away, could become something larger than one person's trauma response. Think about it, Clara continued. We'll talk more after I handle the Cross situation. But Jack, you don't have to just be a driver. You can be something more. You already are. Jack nodded, not trusting his voice. He walked toward the door. Clara followed. At the threshold, Jack turned back. One more thing, ma'am. Clara. Clara smiled slightly. Call me Clara. Clara, Jack allowed himself to return the smile. Thank you for believing that decent people still exist. Thank you for being proof. Jack left, descended in the elevator, crossed the lobby, emerged into November sunlight. His phone showed 11:40. He'd be home before noon, could take Lila to the park, could read more chapters about the protagonist escaping the enchanted forest. But something had shifted. The walls he'd built around himself and Lila remained, but now they had a door. A way for other people to enter, for connection to form, for trust to exist again. Clara had looked at his past, his pain, his protective instincts, and instead of seeing damage or overreaction, she'd seen honor. Jack drove home through the Saturday city traffic, heavy with weekend shoppers and families heading to lunch. Normal people living normal lives. He'd spent 3 years watching them from outside, maintaining distance, keeping everything contained within the radius of Lila's safety. Maybe he thought the radius could expand. Maybe protecting one person could grow him into protecting many. Maybe Sarah's death could mean something beyond his own grief. His phone buzzed. Text from Clara, not work-related, just human connection. Thank you again. I mean it, Jack texted back. Anytime. And he meant it. Whatever came next, board meetings, confrontations with Cross, public testimony, new job responsibilities, Jack would handle it. Because that's what honor required. Not silence, not looking away, not professional boundaries that became excuse for inaction. Just doing the right thing even when nobody was watching. Especially when nobody was watching. He arrived home at noon. Lila ran to the door, her restaurant game forgotten. Can we go to the park now? Jack scooped her up, held her tight. Absolutely. Grab your jacket. As Lila raced to her room, Mrs. Chen approached concern in her expression. Everything okay with your employer? Everything's good. Jack smiled, genuine this time. Better than good, actually. I think things are going to change. Good changes, the best kind. Mrs. Chen left. Jack helped Lila with her jacket, double-checked that he had his phone keys, the usual parental checklist. They walked to the park, 3 blocks from their apartment, Lila chattering about her dolls and the restaurant and whether they could get ice cream later, even though it was November. At the park, Jack sat on a bench while Lila played on the swings. He pulled out his phone, not to check security cameras this time, but to respond to an email from Clara's assistant. Meeting scheduled for Monday, 9 a.m. Discussion of new role parameters and timeline for program implementation. Jack typed confirmation. He watched Lila swing higher, her laughter carrying across the playground. Other families surrounded them. Mothers pushing strollers, fathers teaching children to ride bikes, grandparents providing snacks and supervision. Community, connection. The world functioning as it should, people protecting people that trust operating as default rather than exception. Sarah should have been here, should have seen their daughter grow from 5 to 8, should have experienced Lila's first lost tooth in second grade achievement and current obsession with running doll restaurants. She should have had the chance to become whatever version of herself existed beyond 29 years old. But Sarah wasn't here. The men who'd hurt her had faced no consequences. The investigation had closed. Justice had failed. Jack couldn't fix the past, couldn't bring Sarah back or punish the men who'd killed her. Revenge wasn't justice, and justice required systems that functioned, evidence that mattered, people who refused to look away. But he could fix the present, could make sure Clara didn't become another Sarah, could build something, this Safe Ride program, that prevented other women from facing the same choices, the same dangers, the same terrible outcomes. Honor wasn't about personal vendettas. It was about choosing better every single day, in every single moment where choosing mattered. Lila called from the swings. "Daddy, watch this." She pumped her legs, flying higher, braver than she'd been last month or last year. Growing, healing, moving forward despite the hole in her life where a mother should be. Jack watched, bore witness, stayed present. The walls around his life remained, but now they included more people. Clara, the future employees who'd benefit from the Safe Ride program. Anyone who needed someone to stay to watch, to refuse to look away. His phone showed 2:30. The afternoon stretched ahead, hours of normal life before Monday's meeting and whatever came after. Jack stood, called to Lila. "Time to head home. We'll read more chapters before dinner." Lila ran over, grabbed his hand. "The protagonist is going to escape the forest. I know she is." "How do you know?" "Because someone has to help her. That's how good stories work. Someone always helps." Jack squeezed his daughter's hand. "You're right. That is how good stories work." They walked home together, father and daughter, survivor and protector. Two people who'd lost everything and found a way to keep living anyway. The November air bit cold, but the sun provided warmth. The city moved around them, oblivious to their story, focused on its own infinite narratives of joy and pain and survival. Jack unlocked their apartment door, held it open for Lila. She ran inside, already asking about the next chapter, whether they could make popcorn while reading, whether Daddy thought the protagonist was scared. "Scared but brave," Jack said. "Sometimes that's the only way to be." That evening, after chapters and dinner and Lila's bedtime routine, Jack sat alone in his living room. He pulled up Clara's text from earlier, thought about Monday's meeting, considered the future that was suddenly visible beyond the walls he'd built. He thought about Sarah, wondered what she'd say about all this. Probably something like, "Stop brooding and do the thing." She'd been practical, his wife, direct. She wouldn't have wanted him to spend 3 years in grief-stricken paralysis. She would have wanted him to move forward, to help people, to make sure her death meant something. Jack opened his laptop, began drafting a proposal for the Safe Ride program. Clara had said she wanted him to run it, but that required structure, protocols, training procedures. He'd been military, understood logistics and implementation. This was just a different kind of mission, protecting people from different kinds of threats. He wrote until midnight. Budget estimates, staffing requirements, training curriculum, emergency response protocols, partnership opportunities with local police and social services, public awareness campaigns, expansion possibilities. When he finally stopped, the document contained 47 pages of detailed planning. Maybe too detailed. Maybe Clara would want to start smaller. But Jack had learned that half measures led to failures, and failures led to Sarah's hotel room and closed investigations, and men like Richard Cross who faced no consequences. This time would be different. Jack saved the document, emailed it to himself. Tomorrow he'd review it, cut unnecessary sections, make it presentable for Monday's meeting. Tonight he'd sleep, finally the first solid sleep since Sarah's death 3 years ago. Because something had changed. Not just with Clara or the job opportunity, but inside himself. The guilt that had lived in his chest since that phone call from Kabul, the belief that he'd failed, that his absence had killed his wife, had begun to shift. He couldn't have saved Sarah from 8,000 miles away. No amount of guilt changed that truth, but he could save people now, could refuse to be absent, could stay and watch and intervene when intervention mattered. That wasn't redemption. Redemption implied needing forgiveness, and Jack had done nothing wrong 3 years ago. He'd been a soldier, following orders, doing his duty, trusting that the world his wife occupied would protect her the way he would have. The world had failed, systems had failed, people had looked away. Jack wouldn't. That was the difference. That was the choice he made every day, every shift, every moment someone needed help. He checked on Lila one more time before bed. She slept peacefully, stuffed rabbit clutched, close dreams playing across her face. Whatever happened Monday, whatever came after with Clara and Cross and the Safe Ride program, Jack would still be here. Still be her father. Still be the one person who would never look away. That was enough. That had to be enough. Jack returned to his room, set his alarm, lay down in the darkness. Tomorrow was Sunday. He'd take Lila to her favorite diner for breakfast, let her order pancakes with extra syrup. They'd spend the afternoon at home reading more chapters, maybe watching a movie. Normal life. Routine. The walls that kept them safe. But now the walls had windows. Light could enter. Other people could be seen, could be helped, could be protected. Sarah would have approved. Jack let himself believe that just for a moment before sleep claimed him. The last thought that crossed his mind was Clara's face when she'd watched the security footage. The realization, the gratitude, the decision to fight back against Cross instead of staying silent. That was the difference. That was what happened when people stayed, when they watched, when they refused to let fear win. Sometimes one person staying changed everything. Jack slept. Monday morning arrived with rain and implications. Jack dropped Lila at school, watched her run through the downpour toward the entrance, backpack bouncing. The weekend had passed in comfortable routine, but now reality reasserted itself. 9 o'clock meeting with Clara. Discussion of evidence, strategy, futures. The Voss Industries building rose 23 stories, glass and steel reflecting gray November clouds. Jack parked in the executive garage, took the private elevator to the top floor. Clara's assistant greeted him with professional courtesy, gestured toward the conference room rather than Clara's office. Different setting, different tone. Clara stood by the windows when Jack entered, studying the rain-soaked city below. She wore a charcoal suit, hair pulled back every inch, the CEO. But when she turned to her expression held warmth absent from their previous 6 months together. "Thank you for coming." She gestured to the chair opposite hers at the small conference table. "I compiled everything over the weekend. Security footage, your video timestamps. I also did some research into Richard Cross's history." Jack sat, and Clara opened her laptop, turned it to face him. The screen showed a news article from 4 years ago. Tech executive follows harassment complaint against investment firm. Allegations dismissed. Woman leaves industry shortly after. Another article 3 years prior. Rising CEO settles lawsuit quietly. Details undisclosed. Both cases involved Richard Cross's firm. Jack's jaw tightened. Pattern of behavior. Exactly. Clara's voice carried controlled anger. He's done this before. Multiple times. Women who threatened his business interests or rejected his advances. He isolates them, compromises them, then either blackmails them into compliance or destroys their reputations. And he's gotten away with it because the women either settled quietly or couldn't prove their cases. But we have proof. We have enough to raise serious questions. Clara closed the laptop. But Cross has resources, lawyers, political connections, media relationships. If I go public with this, he'll come at me with everything. Jack met her gaze steadily. Are you prepared for that? Clara's smile was cold. I'm the CEO of a tech company worth $200 million. I didn't get here by backing down from fights, but I need to be strategic. Cross controls 14% of our operating capital. If he pulls out aggressively, he can hurt the company. I need to secure alternative funding, first shore up, board support, then strike. How long will that take? 2 weeks, maybe 3. Clara leaned forward. In the meantime, I'm moving forward with the Safe Ride program. Board-approved emergency funding this morning. I want you to start building the infrastructure immediately. Hire staff, establish protocols, create training materials. When we expose Cross, I want to simultaneously announce this program as our response. Turn his predatory behavior into positive change. Jack absorbed this. Strategic, public relations, gold. Corporate responsibility paired with accountability. Clara understood how power operated. I'll need office space, Clara continued. Budget for 5 initial drivers, 3 administrative staff. Partnership with local domestic violence organizations. Legal consultation to establish liability protections. Can you handle that? Jack had spent the weekend drafting exactly such a plan. He pulled out his laptop, opened the 47-page document. Clara's eyes widened as she scanned the table of contents. You wrote this in 2 days, couldn't sleep. Jack allowed himself slight embarrassment. military habits, over-planning. Clara began reading, her expression shifting from surprise to something like awe. Jack, this is comprehensive. Budget projections, staffing models, training, curriculum, partnerships with 5 different organizations. You've thought of everything. Experience teaches thoroughness. They spent the next hour reviewing Jack's proposal. Clara asked questions, suggested modifications, approved 90% of his recommendations. By 10:15, they had a working framework. Safe Ride would launch in 3 weeks, coinciding with Clara's planned exposure of Richard Cross. As they finalized details, Clara's assistant knocked. Interruption apologetic. Richard Cross was in the lobby, demanding to see Clara immediately. No appointment, but insisting the matter was urgent. Clara and Jack exchanged glances. The predator hadn't waited. He'd come to reassert control, to remind Clara of his power and her vulnerability. Tell him I'm in meetings all morning, Clara instructed her assistant. Offer him an appointment later this week. The assistant left, returned 3 minutes later more flustered. Cross refused to leave. He was making a scene in the lobby, loudly discussing partnership terms and Clara's unprofessional behavior Friday night. Security had been called. Clara's expression hardened. Fine. Conference room B in 5 minutes. Jack, I want you there, ma'am. I'm not sure that's appropriate. Boundary considerations. You're director of safety now. Clara's tone allowed no argument. If Cross becomes threatening, that's your jurisdiction. Besides, I want a witness, someone who saw what happened Friday night. They moved to conference room B, larger space, more formal. Clara positioned herself at the head of the table, Jack standing near the door. Professional distance, but clear presence. 2 minutes later, Richard Cross entered, 3 of his associates behind him. The aggressive one from Friday night, 2 others Jack didn't recognize. Cross's smile was all teeth and no warmth. Clara, we need to talk. Privately. Anything you need to say can be said in front of my director of safety. Cross's gaze flickered to Jack, recognition and irritation crossing his features. The driver. You promoted your driver, Jack Rowan, 20-year military veteran, former reconnaissance officer, currently head of our new employee protection initiative. Clara's voice remained level. Now, what did you want to discuss? Cross sat without invitation. His associates remained standing, flanking him. Intimidation tactics obvious and crude. Friday night was unfortunate. Some miscommunications occurred. I think we should address them before they escalate. I agree. Clara remained standing, maintaining positional authority. Your attempt to coerce me into a secondary location after I'd clearly expressed desire to leave was highly inappropriate. Your subsequent appearance at my residence at midnight was borderline criminal. And your behavior today, making a scene in my company's lobby, demonstrates a pattern of harassment I won't tolerate. Cross's smile vanished. Those are serious accusations. Dangerous accusations. They're documented facts. Security footage, witness testimony, timestamps. Clara's CEO persona was in full force now, cold and precise. I'm giving you the courtesy of addressing this privately before I take it to the board and the authorities. The aggressive associate leaned forward. You're making a mistake. Cross's firm controls significant portions of your operating capital. If we pull out your stock tanks, board will demand your resignation. Then they'll demand it. Clara didn't flinch. I won't be blackmailed into silence about sexual harassment and stalking. Cross stood slow and deliberate. You're emotional, overreacting to a social situation. His tone was patronizing, calculated. We were discussing business. You left abruptly. We followed up to continue the conversation. Nothing inappropriate occurred. Following a woman to her residence at midnight after she's made her rejection clear is the definition of inappropriate. Cross's expression shifted, predator reassessing prey. You know, Clara, I've been very patient with you, very understanding of your inexperience, your tendency to see threats where none exist. But patience has limits. Is that a threat? It's a reminder. Business has consequences. Allegations have consequences. You should think carefully before making choices that can't be undone. Jack remained by the door, silent but observing. Cross was skilled at this layering implications beneath professional language, never quite crossing into explicit threat, but making his intentions clear. Destroy Clara professionally if she proceeded with exposure. Clara picked up her phone, pressed a button. Her assistant's voice came through the speaker. Security, please escort Mr. Cross and his associates from the building. They're no longer welcome on Voss Industries property. Cross's facade cracked. You're terminating our partnership. I'm protecting my employees from harassment. The partnership terms are under review by our legal department. You'll receive formal notification within 48 hours. Cross's voice dropped to something darker. You'll regret this. That sounds remarkably like a threat, Mr. Cross. Jack spoke for the first time, his tone conversational, but unmistakably military, in front of multiple witnesses. Might want to reconsider your phrasing. Cross turned his attention to Jack, sizing him up. The driver who thinks he's someone important. You have no idea what you're interfering with. I know exactly what I'm interfering with. Men who use power to silence women. I've seen it before. It doesn't end well for the men. Security arrived before Cross could respond. 4 uniformed guards, professional and firm. Cross and his associates were escorted out, their protests echoing down the hallway. Clara waited until the conference room door closed before allowing her rigid posture to relax slightly. That went better than expected. Her voice carried irony and exhaustion. He threatened you explicitly. Jack pulled out his phone. I recorded the entire conversation. That's evidence of retaliation. Clara nodded. Add it to the file. We'll need everything when this goes to court. Because it will go to court. Cross won't let this drop quietly. The week that followed brought escalation. Wednesday morning, Clara received a letter from Cross's attorneys threatening defamation lawsuit if she proceeded with harassment allegations. Thursday afternoon, 2 board members requested emergency meeting expressing concern about Clara's handling of investor relations. Friday evening, a business publication ran a story about instability at Voss Industries, citing anonymous sources close to the company. Cross was deploying his resources, attacking Clara's credibility, creating doubt among board members, seeding negative press coverage. Standard playbook for powerful men facing accountability. Clara fought back methodically. She hired the city's top employment attorney, a woman who'd built her career prosecuting harassment cases. She provided the board with complete documentation of Cross's behavior, including security footage and Jack's testimony. She gave an exclusive interview to a respected journalist known for investigating corporate misconduct. Jack, meanwhile, built the Safe Ride program from scratch. He interviewed potential drivers, all former military or law enforcement, all extensively background checked. He established partnerships with 3 domestic violence organizations, 2 women's shelters, 1 legal aid clinic. He created training protocols covering de-escalation, trauma-informed care, confidentiality procedures. And he spent evenings with Lila maintaining the routine that kept both of them anchored. Homework help, dinner preparation, bedtime stories, the normal life that made everything else bearable. But on Saturday morning, normal life fractured. Jack's phone rang at 6:43. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. A woman's voice, unfamiliar and urgent. Is this Jack Rowan, former military, currently employed by Voss Industries? Yes. Who is this? My name is Jennifer Walsh. I'm an investigative journalist. I've been researching Richard Cross for 3 years, documenting his pattern of harassment and corporate misconduct. Your employer, Clara Voss, gave me your name as someone who witnessed his recent behavior. Jack sat up, fully awake now. What do you need? I need to ask you about something that happened 3 years ago. Walsh's tone suggested she was reading from notes. Your wife, Sarah Rowan. She died from an apparent overdose at the Grandview Plaza Hotel. The incident involved 3 executives from Meridian Finance Corporation. Jack's chest constricted. Why are you bringing this up? Because Meridian Finance is Richard Cross's firm. He was a junior partner 3 years ago, recently promoted to senior leadership. And according to documents I've obtained through confidential sources, Boris was present at the hotel the night your wife died. The world tilted. Jack gripped his phone harder. What Walsh continued, her voice gentle but determined. Cross's name doesn't appear in the official police report, but hotel records show he checked into a suite on the 14th floor that same night. Credit card receipts place him at the hotel bar earlier in the evening. And I have a witness, a former Meridian employee who was at the party, who confirms Cross was there when your wife arrived with the 3 executives. Jack couldn't breathe. 3 years of grief and rage in carefully controlled walls, all threatening to collapse. Cross had been there, had been involved in whatever happened to Sarah, had helped cover it up, protected his colleagues, allowed the case to close with no consequences. Mr. Rowan, You still there? Jack forced words through the constriction in his throat. Why didn't this come out 3 years ago? My witness was too afraid to come forward. She signed an NDA as part of her severance package when she left Meridian. She's willing to talk now, go on record, but she needs protection. Cross has destroyed people who've crossed him. Jack's military training reasserted itself, pushing past emotion toward tactical thinking. What exactly does your witness know that Cross arranged the after-party? That he personally invited your wife, told her it would help her career prospects, that he supplied the alcohol and possibly other substances, and that when things went wrong, he orchestrated the cover-up. Paid off the hotel staff, coached the three executives on their statements, used his firm's legal resources to shut down the investigation. Jack stood pacing his small bedroom. Everything he'd suspected 3 years ago, everything the police had dismissed as conspiracy theory and grief-induced paranoia was true. Cross had killed Sarah. Maybe not directly, but through deliberate choices that led to her death. And then he'd made sure nobody paid for it. I need to meet your witness. Jack's voice was hard. I need to hear this directly. That's why I'm calling. My witness agreed to meet with you, but only if certain conditions are met. Secure location, no recording devices, someone present who can verify her identity and corroborate her statement. When today, if possible. 2 o'clock this afternoon. Walsh provided an address, a coffee shop in a neighborhood Jack didn't know well. Bring Miss Voss if she's willing. My witness trusts her more than most corporate figures. Jack agreed, ended the call, sat on his bed for 5 full minutes processing. Sarah's death hadn't been tragic accident. It had been deliberate harm covered up by the same man who had tried to harm Clara. The same pattern, 3 years apart, different victims, but identical methodology. He called Clara. She answered immediately, her voice concerned. Jack, it's not even 7. Is everything okay? Jack explained in Walsh's call the connection to Sarah, the witness willing to go on record. Clara listened without interrupting. When Jack finished, silence stretched between them. Finally, Clara spoke. We're going to destroy him. Not just stop him, not just expose him. We're going to make sure Richard Cross never hurts anyone again. They met at the coffee shop at 150. Walsh was mid-40s, professional attire, eyes that had seen too many terrible stories. Her witness was younger, late 20s, nervous energy radiating from every gesture. She gave her name as Michelle Reeves, former marketing coordinator at Meridian Finance. They took a corner booth away from other customers. Michelle ordered coffee she didn't drink, hands trembling around the cup. Walsh spoke first, establishing context, explaining her 3-year investigation into Cross's pattern of misconduct. Then Michelle began her testimony. Her voice started shaky, strengthened as she continued. She described working at Meridian, being assigned to the client celebration 3 years ago. Cross had been there, charming and charismatic, talking about career advancement opportunities. He'd noticed Sarah called her talented, suggested she join the after-party at his hotel suite. Michelle had watched Sarah hesitate, clearly uncomfortable. But Cross had been persuasive, mentioned her recent performance reviews, implied that declining would reflect poorly on her commitment. Sarah had agreed, conditional. 1 drink, brief appearance, then home. The after-party started normally. Conversation, wine, networking. Then Cross had brought out pills, called them party favors, nothing serious. Michelle had declined. So had Sarah. But the 3 executives had taken them, their behavior becoming more aggressive. Sarah had tried to leave multiple times. Cross kept blocking the door, insisting she stay, promising it would be worth her while professionally. Jack's hands clenched beneath the table. Clara reached over, placed her hand on his forearm. Steady pressure, grounding. Michelle continued. Around 1:30, Sarah had become visibly distressed. She'd been on her phone trying to call someone. Michelle had heard her say a name, Jack. Michelle had offered to help Sarah leave, but Cross had pulled Michelle aside, suggested she go home. This wasn't her concern. Michelle had been young, terrified of losing her job, dependent on the income. She'd left. She learned the next morning that someone had died at the hotel. Found out later it was Sarah. The official story was accidental overdose, but Michelle knew better. She'd seen Cross give the pills to the executives. She'd seen him block Sarah's attempts to leave. She'd watched the whole setup, and she'd said nothing. Guilt broke Michelle's voice. I should have helped her, should have called the police, stayed something. But I was scared, and by the time I worked up the courage to speak, the case was closed. The executives had given their statements. Cross's lawyers had made everything go away. Why come forward now? Clara's question was gentle. Because I saw the news about you. Michelle looked directly at Clara. About Cross's firm investing in your company, about you being young and successful and female. And I thought he's going to do it again. He's going to hurt you the way he hurt Sarah Rowan. I can't live with that. I've lived with Sarah's death for 3 years, and I can't have another woman suffering on my conscience. Jack forced words past the rage threatening to consume him. Will you testify? Yes, Michelle's voice strengthened. I'll testify. I'll go on record. I'll face Cross's lawyers and his threats and whatever he throws at me. Because Jennifer is right, he's done this to too many women. It has to stop. Walsh pulled out documents, statements, hotel records, everything she'd compiled over 3 years of investigation. The full picture of Cross's predatory behavior spanning multiple companies, multiple women, multiple cover-ups. Sarah was just one victim in a long line. Clara would have been another. They spent 2 hours in that coffee shop reviewing evidence, discussing strategy, planning the exposure that would finally hold Cross accountable. Walsh had media contacts ready to break the story. Michelle had agreed to give interviews, testimony, whatever was needed. Clara's attorney had already drafted legal complaints. By 4 o'clock, they had a plan. Wednesday, 5 days from now, they'd go public simultaneously. Walsh's article in the Business Journal. Clara's press conference announcing both the harassment allegations and the Safe Ride program. Michelle's testimony provided to law enforcement requesting reopening of Sarah's case. Jack drove home in a daze. The walls he'd built around Sarah's death, the grief he'd carefully contained, were crumbling. He'd spent 3 years believing he'd failed his wife, believing he could never make it right. Now he had a chance at something he'd never allowed himself to hope for: justice. But justice came with costs. Public testimony meant exposing Lila to the details of her mother's death. Media coverage meant their privacy would be invaded. Confronting Cross meant potential danger, escalation, retaliation. Lila was at a friend's house for a birthday party, wouldn't be home until 6. Jack had 2 hours to compose himself, to rebuild the walls enough to function as her father. He sat in his apartment, staring at the photo of Sarah he kept in his bedroom drawer. Young, smiling, full of future that had been stolen from her. I found him, Jack whispered to the photo. Found the man who hurt you, who covered it up, who walked away like your life meant nothing. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows what he did. His phone buzzed. Text from Clara. Are you okay? Jack stared at the message. Was he okay? No, he was furious and grieving and finally seeing a path toward the accountability that had been denied 3 years ago. But he was also a father who needed to pick up his daughter in 90 minutes and pretend everything was normal. He texted back, I will be. Another buzz. Clara again. Thank you for trusting me with this, for letting me help. Sarah would be proud of you. Jack set down his phone. Sarah would be proud. Or she'd be angry that Jack had gotten involved with another CEO, another corporate situation, another scenario that echoed her death too closely. But Sarah wasn't here to have opinions. She was gone. Her voice silenced 3 years ago by men who valued their careers over her life. Jack stood, splashed cold water on his face, checked his appearance in the mirror. Looked like himself mostly, functional enough to pick up his daughter and celebrate her friend's birthday party without revealing the volcanic rage simmering beneath professional exterior. At 6:05, he collected Lila. She was sticky with cake frosting, chattering about games they'd played and presents her friend had received. Jack listened, asked appropriate questions, drove home through evening traffic. Normal routine, normal life. The walls rebuilt, at least temporarily. But that night after Lila was asleep, Jack pulled up every file he had on Sarah's case. Police reports, medical examiner findings, hotel security footage he'd obtained through private investigator 3 years ago. He reviewed everything with fresh eyes, looking for what he'd missed, seeing patterns that hadn't been visible before. Cross's involvement explained the gaps in the investigation, the incomplete witness statements, the convenient absence of hotel security footage from specific time periods, the police detective who'd suddenly closed the case despite obvious inconsistencies. Cross had connections, resources, power to make inconvenient evidence disappear, to pressure investigators, to protect his firm and his colleagues. He'd done it successfully for 3 years, built his career on the graves of women he had harmed. Wednesday couldn't come fast enough. The days between Saturday and Wednesday stretched with terrible anticipation. Jack finalized safe ride protocols. Clara prepared for the press conference. Walsh verified every detail of her story. Michelle gave her formal statement to police requesting reopening of Sarah's case based on new evidence. And Richard Cross remained oblivious, confident in his power, unaware that 3 years of carefully constructed lies were about to collapse. Tuesday evening, Jack's phone rang, unknown number again. He answered, expecting Walsh with an update. Instead, a man's voice, cold and professional. Jack Rowan, this is a courtesy warning. Drop whatever investigation you're involved in regarding Richard Cross. Forget the allegations, forget the press conference, forget everything, or there will be consequences. Jack's military training kicked in instantly. Who is this? Someone who strongly advises you to consider your daughter's safety. Lila isn't it, 8 years old, attends Riverside Elementary, walks home with Mrs. Chen 3 days a week. Jack's blood turned to ice. If you go anywhere near my daughter, no threats necessary, just awareness. You're involving yourself in matters beyond your understanding. Powerful people have interests in protecting Mr. Cross. Those interests extend to ensuring silence from inconvenient witnesses. The call ended. Jack immediately called Mrs. Chen verified Lila was safe at home. Then he called Clara, explained the threat. Then he called the police, filed a report. And finally, he called Walsh, informed her that Cross had escalated to threatening a child. Walsh's response was immediate and fierce. That's proof of guilt. Innocent men don't threaten children. We're moving forward tomorrow as planned. But Jack, you need protection, both you and Lila. Clara arranged private security. 2 former police officers, both highly recommended, both willing to work overnight shifts protecting Jack's apartment. Jack explained to Lila that some friends of Daddy's would be staying in the living room for a few days, just because Daddy's work was doing something important and they wanted to be extra safe. Lila accepted this with 8-year-old logic. Like when presidents have Secret Service, exactly like that. Jack hugged his daughter, hiding his fear behind parental reassurance. Wednesday morning arrived with clear skies and judgment. Clara's press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. Walsh's article would publish simultaneously. Michelle's testimony had been delivered to the district attorney's office, who'd agreed to review the request for reopening Sarah's case. Jack, dressed in his best suit, helped Lila with breakfast, dropped her at school, under the watchful eyes of the private security Clara had hired. Then he drove to Voss Industries, where reporters were already gathering cameras and microphones ready. Clara stood in her office, reviewing her statement one final time. She looked up when Jack entered, managed a small smile. Ready, ready. Jack stood beside her. Whatever happens today, Sarah's story gets told. That's what matters. Clara nodded. And Richard Cross faces consequences. Finally, they walked to the press conference together. Clara at the podium, Jack standing slightly behind visible presence. Michelle was there too, flanked by Walsh and Clara's attorney. The room fell silent as Clara began speaking. She outlined Cross's harassment, showed security footage, provided timeline documentation. She announced the Safe Ride program, explained its purpose and structure, named Jack as director. She called for accountability, for systemic change, for an end to cultures that protected predators over victims. Then Michelle spoke, told Sarah's story, described Cross's role, admitted her own failure to intervene, demanded justice 3 years overdue. The media erupted with questions. Clara and Michelle answered methodically, providing details, refusing to be intimidated. Jack remained silent, present witness, father finally seeing the truth exposed. At 10:43, police officers entered the room. They approached Michelle, confirming her identity, thanking her for her cooperation. Then they turned to the cameras, made a brief statement. Based on new evidence, Sarah Rowan's case was being reopened as a homicide investigation. Richard Cross was being brought in for questioning. Justice, however delayed, was finally moving. The press conference ended. Clara, Jack, and Michelle stood together as reporters dispersed, as police coordinated next steps, as the mechanisms of accountability began grinding forward. Clara touched Jack's arm. We did it. Sarah's story is out there. Jack nodded, unable to speak past the emotion closing his throat. 3 years. 3 years of grief and guilt in carefully maintained walls. And now, finally, Sarah's death meant something beyond his personal loss. It had become catalyst for change, evidence in a larger pattern, reason for other women to be protected. His phone buzzed, a text from the private security at Lila's school. All quiet. No unusual activity. Your daughter is safe. Jack exhaled slowly. Lila was safe. Clara was safe. Michelle had found her courage, and Cross would face consequences even if delayed, even if imperfect. But as Jack walked toward his car, preparing to return to the routine that kept him anchored, his phone rang again. Different unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. A woman's voice, terrified and urgent. "Mr. Rowan, this is Emily Cross, Richard's wife. We've never met, but I need to talk to you immediately." Before he finds out, I called. Because what you revealed today, it's not everything. There's more. Things Richard did that make what happened to your wife look like practice. And if he thinks he's going down, he'll destroy evidence, including the evidence that proves he killed 2 other women before Sarah. Jack stopped walking. "How many women?" "At least 5, Emily whispered. "That I know of. Please meet me. I'll tell you everything. But we have to move fast." Jack's hands tightened on his phone. Emily Cross's terrified whisper carried implications that transformed everything. 5 women. Not accidents, not tragic mistakes. Deliberate murders spanning how many years? "Where are you now?" "A hotel. Downtown Marriott room, 847. Richard doesn't know I left. He thinks I'm at our country house." Emily's breathing was ragged. "I took everything I could find. Financial records, emails, photographs, things he kept in a safe I wasn't supposed to know about. But if he discovers they're missing..." "I'm on my way." Jack was already moving toward his car. "Don't open the door for anyone except me. I'll be there in 15 minutes. He called Clara while driving, explained the situation. Clara immediately contacted her attorney, arranged for the woman to meet them at the hotel. Then she called Walsh, who agreed to bring a video camera and witness the evidence handover. Documentation mattered. Chain of custody. Everything needed to be defensible in court. Jack arrived at the Marriott first. Room 847 was on the 8th floor overlooking the financial district. He knocked twice, soft and controlled. Emily opened the door immediately, her face pale and exhausted. Mid-40s, expensive clothes, wedding ring, still on her finger. She'd been married to a monster and hadn't known or hadn't let herself know. "Thank you for coming." Emily gestured him inside. The hotel room was standard corporate accommodation, but the bed was covered with documents. Dozens of folders, flash drives, ledgers. Emily had systematically raided her husband's secrets. Jack scanned the materials while Emily talked, words tumbling out, desperate and urgent. She'd suspected for years that Richard wasn't the man he presented publicly. Too many late nights with unconvincing explanations. Too many business trips that didn't align with his calendar. Too many young women joining his firm and leaving abruptly with settlements attached. But Emily had ignored it, rationalized it, protected herself through willful ignorance. Until this morning, when she'd seen the press conference, seen Michelle's testimony, watched Sarah's case being reopened, and something inside Emily had broken the ability to pretend, to look away, to remain complicit through silence. She'd gone home immediately knowing Richard kept records. Men like him documented their power, their conquests, their control. She'd found the safe behind a false panel in his study combination, written in code in his desk drawer. Inside were files on every woman he'd destroyed. Sarah Rowan was there. Emily held up a folder, hands shaking. Hotel receipts, photographs, notes about her vulnerabilities. He planned it, studied her, knew exactly how to isolate her. There are similar files for 4 other women. 3 died. 2 were institutionalized after mental breakdowns. All of it deliberate. Clara arrived with her attorney, then Walsh with her camera. They spent 2 hours cataloging evidence while Emily narrated Cross's methodology. He targeted successful women who threatened him professionally or rejected him personally. He befriended them, gained their trust, arranged situations where he could compromise them. Then he either leveraged the compromising situations for business advantage, or if they resisted, he escalated to permanent solutions. The attorney photographed every page, recorded Emily's statements, established timeline connections between the cases. Walsh documented everything for her expanded investigation. Jack forced himself to look at Sarah's file, reading Cross's clinical notes about his wife's career ambitions, her marriage to a deployed soldier, her vulnerability to professional pressure. Cross had known exactly who Sarah was, exactly how to manipulate her, exactly how to create the circumstances that killed her. And he'd done it before, would have done it again to Clara if Jack hadn't intervened. By noon, they had enough evidence to bury Cross permanently. Emily signed affidavits, provided access to the financial accounts that showed payments to cover up previous incidents. She agreed to testify despite knowing it meant ending her marriage and becoming a target herself. Why now? Clara asked what everyone was thinking. Why not years ago before more women got hurt? Emily's eyes filled with tears. Because I was a coward. Because I benefited from his wealth and power. Because looking away was easier than facing what I'd married. But I saw your press conference, Miss Voss. Saw you refuse to look away. And I thought about all the women who didn't have someone like Mr. Rowan to protect them. I can't give them back their lives, but I can make sure Richard never takes another one. They moved Emily to a secure location Clara's security team had arranged, transferred all evidence to Clara's attorney, who immediately contacted the district attorney's office. By 3 o'clock, warrants were being prepared. By 5 o'clock, police were executing search warrants at Cross's office and home. Richard Cross was arrested at 6:17 p.m. in his downtown office, surrounded by lawyers who couldn't prevent the inevitable. The charges were extensive conspiracy to commit murder evidence, tampering, witness intimidation, financial crimes spanning a decade. Bail was set at $5 million, which Cross posted within 2 hours. But posting bail didn't stop the avalanche. Thursday morning brought more revelations as Walsh's expanded investigation published. 6 women total, counting Clara's near miss. 3 confirmed deaths, 2 institutionalizations, 1 suicide, 6 months after Cross's firm settled her harassment complaint. Cross's empire of violence stretched back 12 years. The business world responded swiftly. Cross's firm suspended him pending investigation. Board members resigned. Investors pulled funding. Partner companies terminated relationships. By Friday afternoon, Meridian Finance was hemorrhaging value, stock price plummeting, bankruptcy likely within months. Voss Industries conversely saw its stock rise. Clara's transparency and immediate action drew praise from investors and media alike. The Safe Ride program announcement generated positive coverage. Corporate ethics consultants cited Clara's response as a model for handling harassment allegations. But Jack barely noticed the business implications. He was focused on Lila, on maintaining normalcy while her father's name appeared in news stories about her mother's murder. The private security remained at their apartment. Jack explained carefully that Mommy's story was being told now, that people wanted to make sure nothing bad happened to other mommies, that sometimes doing the right thing meant facing scary situations. Lila processed this with 8-year-old clarity. Daddy's a hero, like in the books. Jack hugged his daughter close, more like someone trying to help. Heroes are complicated. Saturday brought unexpected relief. The district attorney called Jack personally to inform him that Cross's attorney had approached them about a plea agreement. Cross would plead guilty to multiple charges in exchange for life imprisonment rather than facing trial and potential death penalty. The DA's office was considering it with Jack. Consent, Jack thought about Sarah, about the 3 other women who died, about the 2 whose minds Cross had broken. A trial would expose everything, give the families closure through testimony. But it would also drag on for years, require Jack and Michelle and Emily to relive trauma repeatedly, give Cross platforms to manipulate and lie. Accept the plea, Jack said, as long as he admits what he did. On record. Every woman, every crime. He doesn't get to hide behind lawyers. The DA agreed to those terms. By Monday, Cross had signed the plea agreement, guilty to 3 counts of second-degree murder, 2 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, 7 counts of evidence tampering, 12 counts of witness intimidation, and assorted financial crimes. Sentencing would occur in 6 weeks, but the outcome was certain. Life in prison without possibility of parole. Cross's statement to the court was read into record, admitting culpability in Sarah's death and the deaths of 2 other women, acknowledging his systematic targeting of successful women, accepting responsibility for decades of violence masked as business dealings. Jack attended the plea hearing with Clara. Michelle was there, and Emily and families of the other victims. They watched Richard Cross, powerful investment executive, admit to being a serial predator who'd used his position to destroy lives. Watched him be led away in handcuffs, no longer confident, no longer smirking. Outside the courthouse, families of the victims approached Jack, thanked him for refusing to let the case die, for protecting Clara, which had exposed Cross's pattern, for being the one person who had stayed when staying mattered. Jack accepted their gratitude with quiet discomfort. He'd just done what should have been done 3 years ago, what systems should have done automatically. His role was simply refusing to look away. But Clara saw it differently. That evening, she called Jack to her office. The sun was setting over the city, casting orange light through floor-to-ceiling windows. The Safe Ride program was launching next week. Staff hired, protocols established, partnerships finalized. Jack had built something that would outlast all of them. "You changed the world," Clara said simply. "You saved my life, exposed a serial killer, and created a system that will protect thousands of people." "That's not nothing." Jack looked at the city below. "It's what Sarah deserved, what all of them deserved." Clara moved to stand beside him. "Your wife would be proud. Your daughter will be proud when she's old enough to understand what you did. I just want her to understand that decent people still exist." Jack's voice was quiet. "That looking away is a choice, that we can choose differently." They stood in comfortable silence, two people who'd survived predators and refused to let survival be their only legacy. The Safe Ride program represented something larger than individual trauma. It was institutional commitment to protection, to believing women, to acting before harm rather than investigating after. The launch event was scheduled for the following Friday, exactly 1 month after the night Jack had intervened at the hotel party. City officials would attend, media would cover it. Jack would speak briefly about the program's mission and structure. But before the public launch, Jack needed to complete something personal. Thursday evening, he drove to the cemetery where Sarah was buried. Hadn't visited in 6 months, couldn't bear the grief and guilt that accompanied standing at her grave. This time felt different. He knelt beside the headstone, traced her name with his fingers. Sarah Jane Rowan, beloved wife and mother, the dates that marked a life cut short. "I found him," Jack said quietly. "Richard Cross, the man who killed you. He's going to prison for life, and I'm building something in your name. A program to protect people the way I couldn't protect you." The cemetery was empty, evening shadows stretching across gravestones. Jack stayed until darkness fell completely, talking to his wife about Lila's progress in school, about the job transition, about Clara, and the unlikely friendship that had formed through shared trauma. "I'm okay," he finally said. "Not healed, maybe never healed, but okay, moving forward. Trying to make your death means something beyond my grief." The drive home took him past the Grandview Plaza Hotel. Jack didn't avoid it anymore. The building was just stone and glass, neutral architecture that had witnessed something terrible. The 14th floor windows were lit, occupied by people who had no idea what had happened there 3 years ago. Maybe that was how healing worked. Terrible things occurred in ordinary places, and life continued, and eventually the terrible things became history rather than present tense. Sarah's death was history now. Cross's imprisonment was present tense. The Safe Ride program would be future tense. Jack arrived home to find Lila already in pajamas. Mrs. Chen reading the final chapters of the Enchanted Forest book. The protagonist had escaped, had overcome obstacles, had found her way home. Appropriate metaphor. Lila looked up when Jack entered, smiled her mother's smile. "Did you have a good meeting, Daddy?" "Very good." Jack kissed her forehead. "How's our protagonist?" "She made it out." Lila hugged the book. "Because someone helped her. That's how good stories work." Jack agreed. That was exactly how good stories worked. Friday arrived with ceremony and significance. The Safe Ride launch took place at City Hall, attended by the mayor, city council members, representatives from domestic violence organizations, and dozens of community activists. Clara spoke first, outlining Voss Industries' commitment to employee safety and corporate responsibility. Then Jack took the podium. He'd prepared brief remarks, professional and appropriate. But standing there looking at the assembled crowd, seeing Emily Cross and Michelle Reeves and families of Cross's victims in the front row, something shifted. "My wife Sarah died because she needed help, and help didn't arrive in time." Jack's voice carried across the room. "She called me from 8,000 miles away, scared and vulnerable, and I couldn't reach through that distance to protect her. For 3 years I've lived with that failure. Believed I could have done something different, been someone different." The room was silent. Lila sat in the front row with Mrs. Chen, listening to her father speak about her mother. "But the failure wasn't mine. It was systemic. We live in a world where women navigate predators disguised as colleagues and partners, where asking for help is seen as weakness, where looking away is easier than intervening. Sarah died because too many people looked away, not because she didn't fight hard enough or I didn't care enough." Jack gestured to the Safe Ride banner behind him. "This program represents a choice, the choice to stay, to watch, to intervene before harm occurs rather than investigate after. It's not just transportation, it's institutional commitment to the idea that everyone deserves to get home safely, that no one should have to calculate whether leaving a party will cost them their career, that decent people should be the norm, not the exception. Applause filled the room. Jack continued describing the program structure, the trained staff, the partnerships with organizations already doing this work. He thanked Clara for funding it, Michelle for her courage, Emily for choosing truth over complicity. But mostly, Jack looked at his daughter. I'm doing this for Sarah, but I'm also doing it for Lila and every other child who deserves to grow up in a world that protects instead of predates, that believes instead of dismisses, that acts instead of looks away. More applause. The mayor approached, shaking Jack's hand for photographs. Media cameras captured the moment, but Jack's attention remained on Lila, who was crying happy tears, pride radiating from her small face. After the ceremony, people approached Jack with stories. A woman whose sister had been assaulted at a corporate event. A man whose daughter had been harassed by her boss. Parents who'd lost children to violence that could have been prevented. Each story reinforced why the Safe Ride program mattered, why institutional change required individual courage multiplied. Clara found Jack as the crowd thinned. You did good work today. Changed the conversation. We changed it together. Jack allowed himself a small smile. You risked your career by going public. Michelle risked her safety. Emily risked everything. I just refused to drive away. That refusal saved lives. Clara's expression was serious, including mine. They were interrupted by Lila, who'd escaped Mrs. Chen's supervision to hug her father. Daddy, everyone's talking about Mommy, saying nice things about her. Jack knelt to his daughter's eye level. That's because Mommy was extraordinary. And now people will remember her story. Make sure it means something. Lila nodded solemnly. I'm glad you told them, even though it's sad. Sad things sometimes need to be told. Jack hugged his daughter, so we can make them less sad for other people. Clara watched this exchange with visible emotion. When Lila returned to Mrs. Chen, Clara spoke quietly. How would you feel about dinner, you and Lila? My place tomorrow night. Nothing formal, just a thank you, Jack hesitated. Professional boundaries still existed, employer and employee relationships had appropriate limits. But boundaries could also be walls, and he'd spent 3 years learning the difference. We'd like that. Thank you. Saturday evening brought unexpected domesticity. Clara's apartment, usually cold and impersonal, had been transformed. Warm lighting, fresh flowers. A dining table set for 3, with a 4th chair left conspicuously empty space for absence to be acknowledged. Lila was initially shy around Clara, but that dissolved quickly over pre-dinner conversation about school projects and favorite books. Clara listened with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions, treating the 8-year-old as a full person rather than a child to be patronized. Dinner was simple, pasta, salad, bread. Clara admitted she'd never cooked much, usually ordered delivery, but tonight felt like an occasion that deserved effort, however imperfect. Lila declared the pasta the best she'd ever had, which wasn't objectively true, but captured the spirit of the evening. After Lila finished eating, she asked the question Jack had been dreading. Miss Clara, did my daddy really save you from bad men? Clara looked at Jack, silently asking permission. He nodded slightly. Yes, Lila, your daddy protected me when I was in danger. He's very brave. Lila considered this, like how he protected Mommy, except he was too far away then. The question was innocent but devastating. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Jack felt his chest tighten. But Lila deserved honesty, age-appropriate truth rather than comfortable fiction. That's right, Jack said quietly. I couldn't help Mommy because I was too far away. But I learned from that, learned to never be too far away again when someone needs help. Lila nodded, satisfied with this explanation. Then you're like a superhero, but without a cape. Clara smiled through tears, exactly like a superhero without a cape. The evening ended with Lila falling asleep on Clara's couch, exhausted from excitement and pasta. Jack carried his daughter to the car, but before leaving, he turned to Clara. Thank you for this, for treating her like she matters. She does matter. Clara's voice was fierce. She's your daughter. She matters more than anything. Jack drove home through quiet streets, Lila asleep in the back seat. The past month had been chaos and revelation, and justice deferred but finally delivered. Cross was imprisoned. Sarah's story was told. The Safe Ride program was launched. And somehow, impossibly, Jack had found connection beyond grief. The following weeks brought routine and adjustment. Jack's new role as director of safety required different skills than driving leadership training, administrative work. He hired a strong team, people who understood trauma and protection, who viewed the work as mission rather than job. The Safe Ride program's first month saw 43 requests for assistance. 43 people who needed safe transportation, who felt unsafe, who chose to reach out rather than risk danger. Each successful ride felt like small redemption. Sarah's death meaning something beyond Jack's personal loss. Clara and Jack developed an unlikely friendship, professional respect, transforming into genuine care. They met weekly to review program metrics, but conversations often drifted to personal territory. Lila's school progress. Clara's board negotiations shared observations about healing and moving forward. 3 months after Cross's imprisonment, Emily Cross filed for divorce and changed her name. She testified at Cross's sentencing, hearing her statement powerful and uncompromising. Because of her testimony and cooperation, 3 additional cases were reopened, expanding the scope of Cross's crimes even further. The sentencing judge called Cross's crimes a systematic campaign of violence against women spanning more than a decade. The 3 life sentences would be served consecutively. Richard Cross would die in prison, his legacy reduced to cautionary tale about unchecked power and institutional failure. Jack attended the sentencing with Michelle, Emily, and families of other victims. They stood together as Cross was led from the courtroom, no longer the confident executive, but a convicted serial killer whose carefully constructed facade had collapsed completely. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked Jack how he felt. He considered several responses before settling on simple truth. Justice delayed is still justice, but prevention would have been better. 6 months after the launch, the Safe Ride program had expanded to 3 other companies, creating a network of protection across the city's corporate sector. Jack found himself traveling to speak at conferences, consulting with other organizations, sharing the model that had emerged from personal tragedy. But his priorities remained clear. Lila came first. Always. He adjusted his schedule to attend every school event, every parent-teacher conference, every moment that mattered in his daughter's life. The walls he'd built 3 years ago still stood, but now they enclosed more people. Clara, who'd become something like family, the Safe Ride team who shared his mission, the community of survivors who'd found their voices through Sarah's story. 1 year after that November night at the hotel party, Clara organized a commemoration event. Not celebration, the circumstances were too painful for that, but acknowledgement. Sarah Rowan's name was permanently affixed to the Safe Ride program headquarters. A scholarship fund was established in her name for women pursuing careers in male-dominated industries. Lila unveiled the plaque bearing her mother's name. 9 years old now, still missing her mother, but finding pride in Sarah's legacy. The inscription read, "Sarah Jane Rowan. Her courage inspires our commitment. Her memory drives our mission." Jack stood with his daughter before the plaque, Clara beside them. 3 people bound by trauma and healing by violence survived, and systems changed. Not a family in traditional sense, but something equally meaningful. People who'd chosen to stay to watch, to intervene. That evening, back at Jack's apartment, Lila asked the question that had been building for months. "Do you think Mommy would be happy with what we're doing?" Jack pulled his daughter close. "I think Mommy would be proud that we turned something terrible into something that helps people, that we didn't let her death be meaningless." And Miss Clara. Lila had started calling Clara by first name months ago, formality dissolved by genuine affection. "Is she like family?" Now Jack considered his answer carefully. Family is people who show up, who stay when things are hard, who choose you even when they don't have to. So yes, I think Miss Clara is family. Lila smiled, satisfied. "Good. I like her. She makes you less sad." Jack laughed softly. "She does. But so do you. You make everything better." They read chapters that night, a new book about a protagonist facing different challenges. Lila fell asleep mid-chapter, safe and warm and loved. Jack watched his daughter breathe, marveling at her resilience, her capacity to grow despite loss. His phone buzzed quietly. Text from Clara. "Thank you for today, for everything. Sarah's legacy is changing lives. Jack typed a response. Thank you for believing that decent people still exist, for being proof. He set down his phone, checked the locks one final time, prepared for tomorrow. Another day at Safe Ride headquarters. Another opportunity to intervene before harm. Another chance to honor Sarah's memory through action rather than grief. The walls around Jack's life remained, but they were different now. Not isolation, but protection. Not fear, but vigilance. Not looking away, but choosing to stay. And in the quiet of his apartment, surrounded by evidence of life continuing, despite loss, Jack finally allowed himself something he denied for 3 years. Hope. Not that the past could be changed, not that pain could be erased, but that the future could be different. That his daughter would grow up in a world slightly safer because people had chosen courage over silence. That Sarah's death, however terrible, had catalyzed something meaningful. That choosing to stay when everyone else walked away sometimes changed everything. Jack checked on Lila one more time, then returned to his room. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new people needing protection, new opportunities to prove that decency still existed. But tonight he could rest. The walls were secure, his daughter was safe, and the work, Sarah's work, his work, their collective work, continued. That was enough. That had to be enough. And for the first time in 3 years it was.